programs. All right, then we get on to it. Then can I say before I got to do my opening remarks, give the instructions. Everyone will be muted as you speak. You mute yourself. Want to speak? Then mute. If you have any questions, put the screen hand up, and then the chair will invite you to speak. Any comments, raise your hand symptoms. Any reason a member calls to leave a meeting, they must indicate to the chair before leaving. Case law is clear, you're not allowed to vote if you haven't heard the full debate. And if the screen freezes, you will have to hear the whole debate. You may be in discussion or whatever. When it comes to recommendations, you'll be invited to vote. So that's all officers and guests to turn off the cameras. The services, we are recording as we speak. And good afternoon to everybody. Welcome to Scrutiny Social Services. Number one, apologies. We've got Councillor Garth Richards. Number two, declarations. I'm declaring my interest on number three because I'm the chair of Social Services Scrutiny and also the chair of Care Repair Magadu. Okay, everybody happy with that? And yeah. You know what A and B. Right, I'm declaring interest on number three. So I'm not knocking off, right? I'm putting everything on mute because I might not get back on.
Good idea. Thanks, Phil. Okay, thanks everyone. So item 3 is the Community Occupational Therapy Service 2020-2021 Disabled Facility Grants Report. So this report covers the performance of the Community Occupational Therapy Service for the year 2020 to 2021. So if I hand over to Angela first to go through the report, please.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Jago. If you look at the report for 2021, whilst we've got the performance for the community OT team, we'll see it was a very exceptional year last year. So the report is reflecting that. You can see from the background, the role of the community OT service is to undertake assessments within people's homes to look at mechanisms such as equipment or adaptations to the home that enable that individual to be as independent as possible. On average, in a month, the community OT service receives around 35 to 40 referrals, and those can range from something really significant, small, such as the provision of handrails, to the request for complex adaptations to a person's property. All referrals that come into the service are triaged and then they're categorised based on the information in the space received at the point of referral as critical, substantial, moderate or low. And I'll give an examples there of what would fall into each of the categories so councillors be aware of the type of referrals we receive. With the assessment then has identified there is a need for adaptation, then that is referred on originally at the first point would go into the grants department and is dependent on what the tenancy is, because there's several routes for adaptations based on the individual's tenancy, and I've outlined the routes in points 3.5. Okay, and 3.6, we've identified that the majority of disabled facilities grants relate to the provision of adapted bathrooms and wet rooms where people are requiring support in that area, which often isn't actually identified until quite later on in the assessment process. Point 4, where we were, the Community Occupational Therapy Service over the last couple of years has seen a considerable turnover in staff within the team, partly due to an issue where posts were reassessed under the job evaluation, which a number of staff left, and we've been recruiting ever since. We currently got to the position then last year where we had a full team of staff complement, and they had made significant progress in reducing the existing waiting list that was for assessments. Point 43 covers the types of assessments, and that most EFGs actually result from the request for support with bathing aids. And we saw a marked decrease in the number of DFGs that were undertaken because most of those were initially triaged as being low category, and so they would take longer to actually get to those within the waiting list. Previously, the management of the physical adaptations were undertaken by the internal grants team. That was disbanded in 2019-20, and the grants process is now undertaken by RCT. But that coincided at the same time as we went into COVID, so there's been a delay in there. At the time it was transferred over to RCT, there were 55 cases that went directly from the grants team and waiting for the work to be undertaken. Okay. The period the report requested, as I said, has coincided with the period of the pandemic, which has had a considerable impact of the work of the team and the provision of DFGs. Where we are now, as I said, the pandemic has impacted on it, and we did initially halt visiting at home, and we had a number of people who were unhappy with community OTs visiting their homes because they were shielding, and most of the people who received DFGs are considered vulnerable and at high risk of becoming infected by COVID-19. In order to manage the caseloads more effectively, the team developed a stricter and a clearer referral criteria to try and prioritise those people who needed the support and we needed to go out on, and so that has made a difference and ensured that we've seen those with the highest priority. Whilst we recruited to all the posts, recently we had one qualified OT and one COT technician leave the authority for alternative employment, and we took the opportunity at that point to review the current makeup of the team, and we have converted a OT post to a senior OT post to improve professional supervision and clinical review. That post has now been glad to say was appointed to last week. So our current position is we've got a senior community occupational therapist is shown as one vacancy there. However, we did recruit to that post last week, and we have 2 community OTs, and the post for the senior was actually filled by an existing community OT, so we now have 1 full-time equivalent vacancy there that is currently going out to advert. If you look at it, we've got, at the time of the report, we have 94 people on the waiting list. As you can see, we respond to the critical referrals immediately. We have no one on that waiting list, and we have 56 to 60% are those waiting for substantial, 34 to 36% moderate, and 3 to 3.2% within the low category. But we have seen that number of people aren't putting referrals in for the lower end works at this point. We've also been using, hence Councillor withdrawing from this, is that we also use a grant called the Enable Grant that is facilitated by Care and Repair, and they also undertake low level works and undertake the assessments on behalf of us, and they can people can refer directly into the Enable arrangements, and again is to promote independence. At the height of the pandemic, there were no urgent assessments were suspended, and as we held some of the work back where people were going out into the community, and we recommenced home visits in June 2020. Where do we want to be? We want to reduce the waiting list for assessments through recruitment to all posts. And as I said, we've successfully recruited into the senior post, and we need to recruit now into and backfill the post of that the previous occupant. We need to implement a draft quality assurance process for the service, including citizen feedback. And we want to strengthen professional supervision arrangements through the recruitment of the senior community occupational therapy post. What do we need to do next? We need to recruit into the vacant post. As I said, we've already recruited into one, and we need to continue to monitor and revise the working arrangements in line with the social distancing guidance. So if there's any questions.
Fab, thank you for that, Angela. Very clear and concise report. Okay, can we go through to Councillor Ian Thomas first, please, and then Councillor Declan Salmon.
Thank you, Chair. Angela, I'm very pleased to see that you've appointed a senior occupational therapist. Can you tell me what grade this post is? And was this decision to appoint a senior officer post anything to do with the improvement board, or did it emanate from the department?
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. The grade of the post is a grade 9, which is in line with the senior practitioner posts within adult social care. We looked at it, what we identified, we were actually asking a neighbouring authority to provide some clinical supervision to our community OTs, because this was one of the posts that was removed from the structure a number of years ago, where we did previously have a senior occupational therapy post within the team. What we found then is because community OTs, in fact, occupational therapists are a sort of rare breed. There's, I think most of the authorities, including health boards, are really having significant difficulties in recruiting into post, because the numbers of people who are coming through the training routes, there's one in North Wales, one in South Wales. There's not great numbers. So most of them that are coming through then are band 5 in health boards. And what they've identified is a large number of those are actually moving back out to Wales and going to work in English authorities. A number of them are because they came to train you and then gone back out. So because we were doing that, but that's it, we lost one of the OT posts, is that they were being supported clinically by one of our colleagues in RCT, who then said, well, we've got a post of you, would you like to come and work for us? So, you know, that then was counterproductive to us retaining OTs in this area. So it was a service decision rather than in the assurance board, but it did go through CMT and the job was evaluated before it went out.
Thank you, Angela, very much.
Thank you. Over to Councillor Declan Salmon.
Ian, you finish your questions?
Yes, I finished that one. We'll take them in turns, Declan, as we go.
All right, okay. You're a gentleman.
Fab.
Right, this is in relation to, in regards to it's DFGs broadly, to be honest. Is there a reluctance by registered social landlords to undertake or allow adaptations to take place in their properties, or are they obliged to let them happen? I'm just mindful that there must be a lot of properties out there with adaptations, some of which may not be needed by the current occupant. And also then, are adaptations left in a property when someone moves? And if so, are those adaptations matched with the needs of future possible tenants so that money isn't spent unnecessarily?
Thanks, Councillor Salmon. Two good points there. I don't think the RSLs are reluctant. As you can see from the report, there's different routes to actually and who pays them. So currently, if they're Bertha Valley's homes or a private landlord, that comes out of the DFG grant. We've been looking and working with RSLs for some time to see when an adapted property comes on the market, not comes on the market, becomes available, they do actually approach the community OTs to see if there's anyone suitable who's waiting for adaptations that may go into there. But if you look at it, it's not just the RSLs, the DFGs are actually undertaken in social landlord properties. High proportions are actually undertaken within private homes. Because if you look at it, the housing stock within Merthyr, a lot of them don't lend themselves to adaptations either. So, you know, if you look at it with the bathroom level access, stair lifts, when you start looking at the stair lifts, you know, those tend to be left in the properties. So as far as possible, they do try and recycle it and reallocate that property to someone who's looking for an adapted property. But obviously there are some issues as well, because I know one of the issues with doing that was, say you had an adapted property in Gurnos that would have met an individual's needs, but they were looking for a property in Treharris. Because of their social networks and their caring support networks, they were, you know, quite reticent to move into an area where they would lose those connections. So wherever possible it is done, but not always feasible.
Lovely, thank you, Angela. I'll go back to Ian if you like, or Sherelle.
Thank you. Yeah, Ian?
Hang on, Sherelle. Sorry.
That's okay.
Right, Angela, I'll ask you a question on paragraph 4.6. You're talking about the grants team being disbanded and the work passed over to RCT. Why would you decide to do that as opposed to restoring your own grants team to full health?
The grants team actually sat in with housing, so it wasn't the social services decision, that was the housing decision. So I think the two previous occupants of the grants posts were coming, one wanted to take early retirement, and I think the other was finishing on ill health. And I think the housing team then made a decision to see if they could look at it as a regional arrangement with RCT. So the decision was housing rather than social care.
All right, thank you, Angela. Could I ask one more, Chair, before I go back off?
Absolutely.
Yes. This is just a minor question, Angela, and it relates to paragraph 3.4. You say that, and it's in relation to the provision of bath aids and the applications for bath aids. You say you'd give a low priority to any application where there's no medical reason to support the need for bath aids. I was wondering if you could give me an example of what would be a medical or a non-medical reason, and where a person may require bath aids. Because why would anybody apply for a bath aids if they didn't need them? And if they can't have them, sooner or later that would become a medical problem.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Thomas. Maybe I didn't put it as clearly as it should be. When some people make a referral into the community OTs, and what they would suggest is they're having some difficulty in getting in and out of the bath, but there is no medical reason why they need a level access shower other than limited mobility. So that wouldn't be classed as a priority in terms of the response. It doesn't mean we wouldn't do it, but it wouldn't be seen as one of the priority areas. You know, but then the priority would be increased should someone have a skin condition that requires them to, such as eczema, where they require emoluments to put in the bath to soak in for their skin condition, where people have considerable problems with continence, where that is going to have an impact on their skin condition. So that would then increase the priority for them to be the assessment to be undertaken.
Right, thank you, Angela. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay, Sherelle, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Declan Salmon?
I've only got one more, Chair, but if you want to come in with Annie, you can, no problem.
Okay, if I just ask one first then, Councillor Salmon, is that okay? In terms of the report, it refers to 3.3 refers to the average being around 35 assessments coming in per month, so roughly 420 a year. Would that be reflective of the last year, or is that a general statement of monthly assessments, or is that accurate for the year that we've just had in 2021? First of all, please.
Oh, thanks, Councillor Jago. What you tend to find is there is we've averaged that out. Sometimes we get greater than that number, sometimes we get less. But it is in the region of 30 to 40 months regardless, and that was pre-COVID and since COVID. So the referrals haven't stopped coming in. What you're finding is some people have been more reluctant to having someone come into the property to undertake the assessment because of that risk of people coming in there and because of COVID and people self-isolating and shielding. So it is roughly the same on a monthly basis. But what I didn't put in is that the community OTs also cover children's services as well as adults. So they're not all adult services. Some of those could be children's with complex needs as well, though the numbers are far lower for children.
Fab, thank you. And the report then also refers to, out of the assessments that were undertaken, 37 led to referrals for grants and for adaptations, etc. in the home. And I just really wanted to gauge what this figure looked like compared to a previous year, for example, 1920. So 34 for the year going into for the grants. Is that on par with previous years, or is it much lower this year? Or I just wanted a feel for it, really, Angela.
Well, so I've got the figures for the previous year to hand. Based on, if you look at it for the previous year, we had 57 that were handed over to RCT at the beginning of the year. So that would have meant immediately there was a higher level of referrals the year before. We're also seeing a level of reduction as well because of the use of the Enable grant. So that is, Welsh Government money, and it's Care and Repair undertakes the assessment, it undertakes the feasibility, and it facilitates the works as well. But they tend to do more of the low to medium pieces of work. They're not actually picking up them under the Enable grant. They're not picking up the more complex pieces of work. So it varies year on year, but it is around the same figure, slightly lower than a normal year based on the previous. Okay.
And in terms of the grants that via Enable Care, and they are directly managed via Care and Repair, do they report the numbers that they have done back into the local authority? Because I think that would be useful to form part of the report so we can see the overall picture for the local authority.
They provide the report to us on a quarterly basis because we have to report to Welsh Government. So whilst we've passed that over to Care and Repair to manage on our behalf, we still as a local authority have to report to Welsh Government on a quarterly basis. So we have got those figures, and it actually shows then the types of work that has been done. And I did want to include it in this, but didn't get a chance to get the full year figures back because at the time of writing it was just before the end of the financial year where we would have had the final figures in. So that's why they weren't included at this point.
Right,
but
okay.
I'm happy to share with you if you the details.
Yeah, excellent. And if I could just make that recommendation that it's in for future year reports, to make sure that we can see the full picture of the needs of residents across Merthyr, I think that would be really useful. Okay, thank you. Go back to Declan, Councillor Salmon, please.
Lovely, thank you, Chair. Angela, it's it may be in the report, but maybe I've just missed it. But it's in January 2020, the grants element of the DFG was commissioned from Rhondda Cynon Taf, And at the time of transfer to Rhondda Cynon Taf, 54 cases with the grants department were transferred across. What's that like now, bearing in mind the coronavirus pandemic?
I think looking at the numbers, again, this information is held by housing rather than social services. There were a number that withdrew completely, so the pieces of work weren't progressed. Some of them are still on hold or just about to progress because, again, it isn't just the fact that the grants couldn't pick up the work. It's the issue that people are unhappy about having builders in their property at this time. So, you know, it's twofold really. Is one, the ability to get staff going out there, including construction and builders. But then on top of that is people's reluctance to have people into the property to do work during this time. But that seems to be easing. And OK and Repair have picked up some of the work, hence Councillor Smith withdrawing from this. So they are undertaking some of the work on this being commissioned via the grants department in RCT on our behalf.
Okay, thank you, Angela. Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions? Councillor Ian Thomas, please.
Thank you, Chair. Angela, paragraph 4.4. You say new requests for DFGs were not progressed from June 19 onwards. Now, this was before the COVID pandemic took effect, and I was wondering if you could just make a comment on that.
Thanks, Councillor Thomas. The reason they weren't progressed at that time, the assessments were continued to be undertaken by the Community OT team, and they were passed to the grants department. At that point, the two grants officers were actually on long-term sick leave, and so there was no one in the grants department to progress those at the time. And I don't think one of them came back much later, but only for a short period to support the transfer of the existing open cases over to the grants team in RCT.
Thank you, Angela.
Thank you. And a question from Councillor Chris Davis, please.
Thank you, Vice Chair, Councillor Jago. Mine wasn't a question as such, mine was more of a comment. So if there aren't any other questions from committee members, I just wanted to just say a few words about some of the work that the Cabinet and officers have been doing around the COTS and the DFG process. But I leave it to you. If there's no further questions from members, then maybe I could just make a comment.
Fab. OK, thank you. So can I just clarify, are there any more questions from members? Ian, is that an... Oh, there we go. It's gone. Excellent. No, that's fine then, Chris. Over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chair. Is that OK, Councillor Thomas, or did you have a question?
No, I had a comment. I didn't know if you'd finished questions.
I'm quite happy to give way to let you comment first. This is your committee, so I'll let you comment and then I can comment after. OK, it was only a very brief comment, and it's just to tell you that in relation to paragraph 6 and paragraph 7, where you want to be and what you're going to do, I think those comments are spot on, and that's all I've got to say in it, really. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you.
Councillor Salmon, did you want to?
Chris, I'm quite happy for you to go first.
OK, thank you. I wanted to thank Angela for a really well set out and really informative report, and also for committee for your engagement around this matter. If I do recall, Councillor Thomas, I think Alan did bring a report a little while ago to full council about the changes. But obviously, you're in a life of a pandemic and not physically sitting in the council chamber. It's quite easy to forget, but I think a report did come around the change of obviously the grant department and obviously moving it across to Rhondda Cynon Taf, but that was a little while ago now. During the last year, the Cabinet, we've had a little subgroup made up of myself, Councillor Geraint-Thomas and Councillor Hughes, because all of this really kind of sits across sort of certainly 2 of our portfolios, but some of it does impact on councillor Hughes if there's any planning and stuff. And we've been meeting with the officers in housing and social care to kind of quality assure, monitor, making sure that we've got the right systems in place and making sure that, what we are getting out of the contract with Rhondda Cynon Taf is obviously value for money. That we've got the right processes and systems in place. The quality assurance on the contract monitoring is there. Some things have come out in terms of things like clerk of works and quality of works that we are looking to try to address. Angela's report I think covers the real bulk of this. We are in a position where there is quite an underspend, but we are very optimistic that we will, over this next year, be able to play catch up. We're very fortunate that this isn't technically government grant, it's local authority money, so there's no risk of any DFG monies ever going back to Welsh Government. It's money that this authority from last year into this year we're able to roll over, because this is really, really important that we have homes that are fit for purpose, that people who need aids, adaptations, who need a home for life, that we can, as a local authority, provide that, facilitate that, because that's really, really integral to our strategy. I think it would be really useful as this process starts to kind of pick up pace and we come out of COVID, that this would be one of the things I recommend to committee that we bring back to you, because we're still learning from RCT, the work of care and repair. Some of the things that as a cabinet we want to introduce, working alongside the officers to strengthen the process, to make sure we get the DFGs to the people who need them most in our communities, who've got homes that are fit for purpose to meet the needs moving forward. So I really would encourage that we look to bring a further report around some of those dimensions, building on some of the housing elements, around the contract monitoring, around the procurement and around the delivery of Angela's really set the scene today, but I think there's more around the deliverability and actually securing these DFGs for our communities that I think we can bring back to you and get housing to come and joint author a report. If you, Councillor Jago and committee, would welcome that. But thank you for today and thank you for allowing me to say a few words.
Excellent, thanks Councillor Davis, and yes, I'm sure I'm speaking on behalf of the whole committee that would be welcomed, because as you said, we need to be able to keep our residents at home for as long as possible and safe, and being as safe as possible in the same vein. So thank you for that. Okay, Councillor Salmon.
Thank you, Chair. Just quickly, Angela mentioned that residents would have been unhappy with builders going into their into their houses because of the coronavirus pandemic. But I had the pleasure last year of meeting 2 of your workers at an elderly resident's property, and it was just after the first lockdown. Obviously, anxiety was high with that resident, but your staff were absolutely fantastic. I've got to say, they put that resident's mind at ease. And I do know that because I've spoken to that elderly resident a couple of times after as well, that she's on first name terms with your staff, and absolutely fantastic. So I just said I'd say that.
It's an excellent bit of feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Salmon. That is really helpful and really useful. So it's really good to get positive feedback. And I think in general, the community OTs do get a lot of positive feedback. Whilst they do the assessment, it often isn't just a one-off assessment. They visit a number of times, and people with complex needs, it's not just a one-off piece of work that they do. So thank you very much for that.
Excellent. Any other observations or comments regarding this agenda item, please? No? Well, thank you very much for everybody's input. They'll close this agenda item so we can ask Councillor Bill Smith to rejoin us. There he is, as by magic.
All right, folks, thank you very much. Councillor Jago, thank you very much for chairing that that item because it's most important for our senior people and people that got ill health. And so back on the agenda then, and on the agenda we got close the page. On the agenda we got the forward work program. Okay. We had a bit of a meeting yesterday with officers and the cabinet member on this, and we didn't settle it. So we got the next meeting roughly about May the 14th. So if any members got anything to put on the agenda for me to take forward to agenda it for the work program for next year, can you send me an email please, or send it to Safe, and it'll be working for me. Are you happy with that?
Happy,
All
Chair.
right.
Yeah.
Student referrals. We did have a referral back 2 meetings ago. Cheryl, what was, I can't remember the name of the report now.
What I was querying was when the safeguarding policy of the local authority was the last updated. So we had a response back off Caris to say that it has been reviewed, but there's no date but there's no date on there for the review, and it doesn't need to be updated because there's no change in legislation. That's okay. But I feel in terms of good governance for the local authority and to prevent questions like I had coming up in the first place, all policies should have a review and revision as part of the policies. So the front page, the second page, for example, should always have the modification of the policy. So even if there's been a review and no changes are needed because there's been no changes in legislation, it should be dated and noted to that effect and signed off by the appropriate person to ensure that, you know, we can satisfy that we are adhering to good governance structures and making sure that there are policy reviews in place. That would be my recommendation moving forward.
Members happy with that? I am, because you got we spend a lot. We spent most of 2 meetings on this discussing it, and it should be done automatic. Good governance, you need good governance. People know what's happening, and if we don't know what's happening, we'll be a bit of a mess. So, members happy with that? Take it forward.
Happy, Chair.
Thank you very much. I think Safe is there. You put that on the work program, and we double checked on the line.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Councillor Smith, I'm more than happy to take that forward and discuss that with the Cabinet and corporate management team. I don't know whether Lisa wants to pick up, because Councillor Jago, when you raised the issue of the corporate safeguarding policy, I asked for it to be agended on the corporate safeguarding reference group, and I know that I wasn't able to get to that particular meeting, but whether Lisa can update, because it was an agenda item and her and John Eyre did discuss it with corporate safeguarding reference group members. So Lisa, whether you can update Councillor Jago and Councillor Smith.
Yeah, so following the last scrutiny meeting with queries about the policies, we took both policies, so the corporate safeguarding policy and the whistleblowing policy, to that group. So we reviewed and updated the corporate safeguarding policy. So that's been done, and that's been shared with auditors because they've recently been doing a safeguarding audit. So most of the changes are around the new procedures. So we've done that. Appreciate your comments about the front sheet. So we probably need to add that to it to show that, you know, we've updated it on that date. The whistleblowing policy we did review, and we went through it in great detail with all the members of that group. The feeling was that there were certain things in there that were quite sort of legal, if you like, jargon to us, that we didn't know whether we should change or update. So we did go to Caris, and Caris said that we shouldn't be reviewing the document or updating because there'd been no change to the legislation. So there were some tweaks to it from point of view of typos and things. So we note your comments that although there wouldn't be significant change to the whistleblowing policy because there's been no change to legislation, we can just say we've gone through it with, you know, the relevant officers and just, you know, note the review. So we'll look at that as in the front sheet.
Excellent, thanks, Lisa.
Yeah, Lisa, thank you much, because we need that little bit to okay it. Okay, happy with that? Great.
Yes.
Shouldn't put that reflection and evaluation of meetings. I wasn't in, so what do you think? We good. What's the chair like? Any good?
Excellent.
Oh yeah, that's what about your mind.
Not so good as you though, Bill.
Oh, see now? I give my wife.
Good comeback.
I give my wife 5 of her. Anyway, I got no any other business deemed by the chair. I haven't got anything. Can I say thank you very much for your time? Appreciate it. Councillor J.O., thank you very much for chairing. Okay.
You're welcome.
Keep safe, folks. Look out yourself.
Thank
All the
you.
best, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks. Diolch.
That,